Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today's webcast, Navisworks for Revit users. Our presenter today is Dan Rosenberg. He's a solutions engineer with Hagerman and Company. We're also joined on the line by Brett Barkman. He's a solutions engineer with Hagerman and Company as well, and he's on the line to help field questions as we go. Before we get started, I'll let you know that you are in listening only mode. If you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and they will be addressed at the end of the presentation or throughout by Brett. As we close down the session today, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey. We do ask that you take a few moments to fill that out. This webcast qualifies for one AIA continuing education credit. If you would like to receive this credit, you can leave your AIA number on question number 4 of our survey. Additionally, all registrants will receive a follow-up email containing a link for the recording of this presentation. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Dan.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now. All right. There you go. All right. So I'm very excited about today's presentation and have just been bouncing around the room all morning here. I'm thinking this will be highly beneficial for any noobs out there, and even our seasoned Navis users might pick up a thing or two you didn't already know. So regardless of your experience level, I am glad you all decided to take a moment from your day, and wanted to thank you for joining our web session. We do have a pretty ambitious schedule today. I usually like to jump right in to the cool stuff, but I am going to start off with some basics in a PowerPoint presentation. Some of these things can be a little confusing, so I think this will be good, especially for people just starting to look into using Navis. Then we will talk briefly about what you need to do on the Revit side to get your model ready for use in Navisworks. Again, I will try to show this without jumping into Revit so we can save as much time as possible for our Navisworks demonstration. I guess it makes sense to start with some of the easier tools to get them out of the way, like measure and section tool, that it can all be done after appending your models. And then a pretty neat feature is the model compare. Then we'll do the animator and timeliner, which will be the bulk of the presentation. And if we have time, we'll get into the clash detective and some other cool stuff. I really wish we had time to show up. So, and of course, we'll leave some time for a question and answer session. So there are 3 types of Navisworks. The first one is Navisworks Freedom. It is free and anyone can download it. It is essentially just a viewer. So that means it can't open all types of Navisworks files. It can only open NWD files. And this will make a little more sense once I discuss the different file types on the next slide. All right, so with Navisworks Simulate, you get all the features except the clash detective. And that brings us to Navisworks Manage, which is the full version, and it comes with the AEC collection. I believe Simulate comes with AEC collection as well, but you might as well just install Manage, and that is what we will be using in today's webcast. So that brings us to the 3 different file types. The first file type you need to know is the NWC or .nwc. That is also called a Navisworks cache file, and that is what Navisworks is reading when you open a Revit, AutoCAD, Inventor file, or something else in Navis. Even if you open the file natively within Navis, the software converts it to NWC. And that is what the software is actually reading. So if you ever saw an NWC file next to one of your project files and you didn't remember creating it, my guess is that it was opened in Navisworks at some point, and that's why that file is there. So the next file type is a NWF. I tend to think of this as the working file or master file where I store all of my markups, viewpoints, clashes, animations, etc. This will also save the references to other files you are working with, whether they're NWC, DWG, RVT, NWD, and on and on. All of these files will be linked into that file as references. So you need to make sure your file paths are up to date and you don't move the files that are used. Now, the file size for NWF will be smaller since the files are all referenced and not actually embedded. And that brings us to the NWD. So what's the use of the NWD file? Well, it can be thought of as a completed project and mostly used when the native CAD files are no longer subject to change. The only time I typically use the NWD is if I need to send the file to someone who needs to view the file in Navisworks Freedom. And if you're using AutoCAD terminology, then I would say this is comparable to a bound XREF since all the files are embedded into one. Therefore, the file size is typically a little bigger with these. All right, so once you understand what these file types are, the next thing we need to do is decide the best way to convert our Revit file to NWC. The first method is to just simply open your Revit file from within Navisworks. In this case, it will convert the file to an NWC and save it in the same directory. With this method, it will import whatever is displayed in the default 3D view. So if you have a section box enabled, it will only import that portion of the project, or if you have certain things hidden, extra things that should have been hidden shown, again, that is what will be imported. And if you are good with whatever came in, then you're good to go with this method. If you would like to have a little more control over how Navisworks creates the NWC file and imports it, you can do some prep in Revit by cleaning up the default view. So in this case, I would make sure my visibility settings show exactly what I want imported. A lot of people don't know this, but one trick you can do is create a duplicate of your default 3D view, name it Navisworks or even just Navis. Then that is the view Navisworks will use to generate your model. This works a little better because you can do whatever you want in your default 3D view in Revit and not change the way the file will be imported into Navisworks. Now, a lot of times, especially on larger projects or projects where you are not the Navis coordination, or you're not doing the Navis coordination in-house, you will probably be asked to provide NWC files of your model. You can actually export NWC files directly from Revit under the Add-ins tab, External Tools. This is especially useful on multi-story buildings where you have to separate clash detection files for different building stories. So you could have a dedicated view for each floor bound by a section box, then export separate NWC files for each of those corresponding views. You could also do this for different areas of the building, or even if you wanted to have separate NWC files for different building components. For example, I might have one Revit MEP model, but I want to have a different NWC file. Makes it easier for clash detection. Maybe I have different files for ductwork, cold water supply, sanitary piping, lighting fixtures, cable tray, and maybe one for conduit. So in that scenario, I had one Revit file, but could have multiple different Navisworks models. All right, so with that, we're going to jump into Navisworks, do a little model compare, some work with the Animator, Timeliner, hopefully the Clash Detective if we have enough time. And then we'll do the Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to Navisworks here. And let me clean up my screen a little bit here. Make sure everything looks good. All right. Okay, so one thing I neglected to mention is, what is Navisworks? Well, I like to think of Navisworks as a universal tool that will allow you to combine projects from dozens of different platforms all together for the purpose of review and all the advanced features which you will see shortly. So one of the great things is the vast amount of file types that you can open within the software. It really is a universal tool for combining project files. So right now you're looking at my blank Navisworks screen. So if I go to my application menu here, I actually do this every time. When I'm starting off a project file here, we'll click the append button. And of course, I brought, as always, our favorite plumbing consultant to help us out. So when I click this append button, you can see all my different file types listed here. So in this case, I'm looking at all the different files I can open or append from into Navisworks. So we could do your standard NWD, NWF, NWC, 3ds Max design files, Revit, Inventor, AutoCAD, SAT, even SketchUp, SolidWorks, step files, goes on and on and on. But in our case, we're working with Revit models, and I have a couple listed right here. Got one here and one here. So I can do a control selection, select both of those, and click open. Before I do that, you might notice that there's some NWC files already created because I've already opened these within Navis. Now that's going to shave about 20 to 30 seconds for each model off our load time here. So the tool I'm going to show you now is the model compare. When is this useful? So every once in a while, you might get a couple different models from one of your consultants, and you're not sure if anything has changed between the model. Or I've had this happen before where I was working on a file and somebody else was working on it at the same time, and we weren't sure if there was any difference between the two. Well, we have this cool feature called model compare. So let's look at my selection tree over here. And this shows all of the files that I've got loaded in here. So let me expand that just a little bit. So we've got model 1 here and model 2 here. So we can see that there's a little different, but I'm not sure exactly what's a little different yet. So I can control select both of these models and come up here to the compare button. Click that. And we have a few different options. We can find differences in type, name, properties, path, geometry, tree. And then for the results, we can save selection sets, different sets, remove old results, hide matches, and so on. So if I click OK, Navisworks shows me where I've got a little overlap here. And then I can spin around and see a little bit of the difference. So what it did is it hid everything else that was the same and just is showing everything in red that's different. So I can select back and forth between the two. So you can see in this case, I've got this diffuser was moved between the two models. All right, so I can go ahead and say, all right, let's unhide all. So now I can see both models again. And let's say I don't want this red override on here anymore. I can go up to the reset all button and say reset appearances, and it'll go back to normal. Remember, we saved our selection sets here. So if I ever want to come back and look at what was different, you can click through them right here. in that case, it would probably make sense to hide one of the models just so I can see the difference here. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the model compare. Nice little feature. Hopefully it'll come in useful. So let's say I'm ready to work on a new project. One thing that I didn't know when I first started using the software was I couldn't find a way to close out the file I was working on. So I would close the entire application and then relaunch it. But you don't have to do that. If you go to New, it will prompt you for changes. And notice we had opened NWC files, but it automatically, since this is a working file and we did the compare tool, it wants me to know if I want to save this as a new NWF. Again, that was our working file. In this case, no, I was just doing that demo. And then now I've got a blank file here. So that's a neat little trick. You can keep the application open by either clicking new or opening a different file. In our case, we're going to be starting a new file for our next feature, so I couldn't do the open method. All right, so our next feature is the Animator, and this one is pretty fun. I will go ahead and append a couple models together here. So let's back up a step here, and I've got this project file. I'll go ahead and append that now by clicking open. Again, you can see I've already got the cache file created, so that'll save us a few seconds. And here's our nice little building here that we're working on. And it's actually a digital Revit model of our office in Mount Zion. Little model I was working on, pretty proud of that. So anyway, let's say we want to append a site model in here, just to give it a little context. This is easily doable with Navisworks. So I could click append again, and I was actually able to go into another software that comes with the AEC collection called Infraworks, browse to my site, and export the site with some context to FBX, and that can be easily imported into Navisworks. So let's kind of take a look here. There's our big site. So you notice it didn't come in the right place, but that's okay. I'll show you how to fix that with some of the move tools. So in my selection tree, I can, let me step back a minute. You see how I can click on individual parts and pieces of this site model? Well, sometimes I don't really want that. So you can go to your selection tree and select the whole thing, or you can go to your selection resolution, change it to file. So now when I click on it, it gets the whole file instead of individual pieces. So that's another little trick for you. Once I've got that selected, I can go to my item tools, and we've got some modify tools. I'll probably just use move and rotate. So let's go to a top view here. And probably the first thing I'll do is maybe just rotate this around so it's kind of in line with our building model. So I can select this, and there's where I want my building right there. So the first thing I'm going to do is rotate it, and I can just select the little rotate gizmo here, kind of get it in line with my building. That's close enough. Click the move tool, and maybe I'll go to a front view and kind of move it down. Go back up. So this is just for presentation only. Maybe I've got a client coming in who wants to see what their design looks like on the site. So I could quickly put this all together and have a nice little demo. So I might do one little rotate, just get it. That's pretty good. All right, so let's look here. Maybe I'll move it up just a little bit. Oh, a little too much. All right, hopefully that's good. All right, so you can see we've got our building with some context here. And one thing that I did, you know what, I'm kind of on the street here. I'll move it just a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. Getting a little too picky, but that's all right. There we go. All right, that'll work. Okay, so let's do this. Let's take a look at second here. We've got some saved viewpoints over on the right side here. So one thing that I did on the Revit side was I saved some views of my model that came over into Navisworks. So I can use these in my Animator and make a nice little fly-through presentation here. So if I click on Home tab, find my Animator right here, that will bring this up. And I'll click this little plus sign to add a scene. And then I need to add a camera. Add a blank camera here. And what we do is we just make keyframes of what view we want at certain amounts of time. And that will start helping us make a little animation. So I want to be at my front view here. And I'm at 0, so I'll click Capture Keyframe, and then I can either move my slider to the next time, or if you want it exact, you can type it in. So I want to go to 3 seconds, hit Enter, and actually I probably should have gone to the next portion first, and then there you go, Capture Keyframe, and then we'll go to the next time, so I can move my slider. Go to view 3, right side, capture keyframe. I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible. Go to our fourth one. Oh, I forgot to move the slider, so I'm going to have to redo that. Fourth view, back right, capture keyframe. Sometimes I can click stop and play. So this is where I'm going with this. It's just kind of stitching all these views together. So far so good. I'm ready to move the slider up to the next place and do my 5th view. So we'll go to 12 seconds here. Capture keyframe. Then we'll do 15 seconds. 6. Capture keyframe. Move the slider. Go to 18. Around 7 here, capture keyframe. Let's make sure I'm doing this so far so good. Click play. Everything's starting to come together here nicely. Looking pretty good, okay. And you can even move the slider manually. Okay, so we're at 18, let's do one more at 21. And then we should be at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then let's go back to the front view. So you can reuse these views. So I'm going to go to my front view. I guess that should be at 24. Capture keyframe. Let's make sure I did that right. That looks good. Okay, so now I've actually got this entry view here. So I'm going to slide this up to 27. go back to my entry view, capture a keyframe here. And I kind of want to stay in this spot for a minute, so I can right click on that, copy the keyframe, and then paste it back over here. Then let's say I want to go to maybe 30 seconds, or maybe we'll move out a little slower, so I'll give it an extra second. We'll go 31 seconds, or, oh, yeah, sorry, 34. Yeah, we'll do 34. Beautiful. And then I'll go back to my front view, capture keyframe, and that should be good. Let's click loop here and click play. And this would be great. Let's say I've got a client coming in and I could have this playing in the background while we're discussing some of the project, or you could even export this. But another thing we can do with the Animator is we can actually look at certain building components and move them, hence the word Animator. So here we fly back out. So maybe I want the roof to come off a little bit so we can look inside. So let's stop the animation here. I'm going to go ahead and append our structural model. So we have that in there. And then maybe I want to lift the roof off of here. So if I go into my selection tree and expand my file here, I could go find the roof, and I've also got some curtain wall mullions in here to show some of the roof system. So if I select that, I can save this selection set and call it roof and enter. And now I can select that at any other time and select that roof and move that off. So we're going to do that now. So let's go back to, maybe we'll go back to our front view here. Actually, let's go to a front view. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select our roof, come down here and add an animation set from the current selection. And I would probably name this roof or something like that, but in the interest of time, I'll just go ahead and add it. So the first thing I want to do is capture a keyframe of this roof in its original location at 0. All right, now let's say maybe when I get to my right side of the view, I want it to be all the way lifted up. So what I could do is use this move button here for translate animation set and just lift that up. All right, then immediately capture a keyframe. And then here's the nice thing. So let's say I want this to stay up like that. Let's see if that worked. Yeah, so it's lifting up as I'm rotating around here. All right, so what I can do is, let's say I want to keep this roof raised maybe until I get right here. So I could right click on this, copy keyframe, paste that, then right click on the keyframe from its original place, copy that. Let's say when I want to get maybe over here, I want it back down to the 0 point. So if I click stop, play, let's let that run. Okay, roof now stopped at its upper position. See our train tracks from our FBX model. Now you can see it starts to lower, get back down all the way, zoom in, sit there for a minute, fly back out, and our animation is looped, so it'll just keep playing. All right, so that's the Animator. So maybe since we've done a lot of work here, maybe we could go ahead and save it. So let's click Save, and maybe I'll just call it 2018-Animator. Save it, and then I think that's enough on our Animator. I can't think of anything else to talk about at this time. So with that, let's go ahead and transition to our Timeliner feature. So the Timeliner is predominantly used for construction scheduling and visualizing when parts and components are going to be on the site at certain times. So I have a demo that's kind of already done that'll show you the more traditional use of this tool, and then I'll kind of do our own little example here. So let me go ahead and open up a file that I had a while ago. Excuse me, browsing deep onto my hard drive here. But I've got this Timeliner here. If I click open, this will kind of show the really traditional way the Timeliner feature is used. So if I open up Timeliner, switch over to the Tasks tab, you can kind of see, so I've got this gatehouse here, and in my Timeliner view, let me open this up so you can see it a little better. We've got a Gantt view of our construction schedule, and we've got tasks over here on the left. So for every component, every task has been associated with components of our model. Now, this was probably generated from a Microsoft project that had been imported, and there's ways to automatically map building components to the tasks over here. So you can actually automate a lot of the tediousness of tying all this stuff together. But here's what a finished simulation will look like. So we'll start at the beginning of our timeline here, and we'll just go ahead and click play. So yeah, let me zoom out maybe a little bit so we can see things that are just going in or under construction show up with a green transparency, and once they're finished, they will show up fully rendered. And here, let me bring this up a little bit so I can do a little turntable while we're going through here. You can see all the tasks as they're going in. And actually, there's an option where we could put text in here to show what's going in when. So that's just a setting up here. There's things you can do. You can do planned start and end dates of construction, or actual, or even the differences. Let's see here. All right, so that would be like the traditional use of this tool, but you could also do it for presentation purposes, and that's what we're going to try to do now. So let me click New, and let's start a new project here. So I'll go ahead and append a few files together here. Let's go back to our presentation folder. All right, so I'll grab my Revit files here. Open these up. Okay. So really all I have to do is go to my Tasks tab, Add Task. Maybe I want to do one for footings and foundations. Click enter. So what I do here is I select this, and I need to assign some building components to this task. So I can go to my selection tree. Maybe I'll hide these models. So there, we're just looking at the structure here. So maybe I want to do, let's expand the structural model, and let's do everything on that level. So once I've got that selected, I can click attach, current selection, and this is key too here. So it'll say explicit once you've got that attached. And then this is important too. You want to change the task type to a construct. Actual start date. So this is not going to be for construction. This is for presentation. So I'd probably just maybe do like 1 day for the start and end. And then maybe we'll call that good. And I'll add a few more tasks here. Let's do a couple more here. So instead of going through my selection tree, you can select stuff from within the model. So my selection resolution was set to select the whole model. I can switch that back to geometry, and now I can select the individual framing elements. So let's select this. Let's assign that to this task. And then we'll do this maybe January 2nd. I'm going to give myself some more room here. Then we'll do, oh, we got to make it a construct. Otherwise it won't, otherwise Navis won't know what to do with it. Okay, we'll do another one. So it's a little tedious. So I'm just going to do a few of these, and then I'll jump to one that's more fully baked. Hopefully we can get through this with enough time to do our little clash detective. All right, let's do a couple more here. All right, so these are all going to be a construct. All right, so maybe we'll do our second one, select that, attach, and then I'll just go to the next one, attach, next one, attach, next one, attach, and we'll do one more here. Didn't mean to dock that, that's all right. All right, so now that I've got some geometry to work with here, I'll go over to the configure tab. Now I don't want mine to show up with a 90% green transparency, so I could say, let's just show the model appearance. And then maybe go over to simulate, check the settings here. So start date probably needs to be a little earlier in the day. Let's make it like 1 a.m. And then the end date, yeah, the 7th probably makes sense because that's the last date. So we'll change the playback time maybe down to like 20 seconds here, and let's see how that looks. So if I click play, you can kind of see everything coming together. Oh, I forgot to do the slab. Whoops. So I probably could have sped that up a little more. And in fact, maybe we'll get out of this file and I'll show you one that's a little further along. All right, so let's do that now. So I'll go ahead and save this one. We'll call it 2018 Timeliner. And then let's open another one. Where did I put that? There we go. Yeah, So this one, you can see I've got a few more tasks already defined in here. And let's go ahead and maybe do a little orbit here and click simulate. So we're kind of orbiting through here, letting that roll. There goes walls, doors, some ceilings, roof. There we go. So I probably could have slowed that down a little bit, but just for purposes, you kind of probably get the idea from there. All right, so I think we're doing pretty well on time here. Let's go ahead and maybe do a little bit with the clash detective. So for that, I'll create a new project. And we could probably get out of our timeliner here. So I would say the clash detective is probably the most powerful tool you've got within Navisworks, because you can take any models and run tests to see if you've got any clashes in there. So let's go ahead and do that right now. All right, so first thing we got to do is append our model here. And in my case, let's say I want to make sure that my sanitary piping doesn't hit any column footings. So I've got my structural model and I've got my plumbing model. So I'll select both of these, click open. And I thought I had an NWC file already created, but it looks like maybe I didn't. So that's why it's taking a little longer here. But still shouldn't be too bad. And that's fine. Should be going a little faster. I don't want to click on anything and make it mad. All right, it's moving. Yeah, it'll kind of start off this slow and then it should speed up rapidly. There we go. Okay. All right, so here we have plumbing model with our structure, and we can see that visually we can see we do have an issue, but on a bigger project, you're not going to be able to visually inspect everything. So if I go to my clash detective tool, this is where you can add a new test. And what you'll do is you'll just select elements or entire models from selection A and run tests versus selection B. So in my case, I could probably run this entire model versus this entire model and just see what I get. So we'll do plumbing versus structural. And just with all the defaults here, let's just run and test and see what we get. So I've got 4 clashes here, and you can run through them. It creates a viewpoint for each one of these, and you can kind of cycle through them and see. So I'm getting clashes for things that I might not have actually cared about. So like maybe I don't really care about the foundation wall or the slab. So I could actually do another test, and not worry about those. So we could add another test. But you know what? Before I do that, let's say I'm happy with the clash test I had here. You can go over here and you can actually run a report. It'll create a nice little thumbnail of each one. So I'll write a report out. Let's create a new folder here. Save that. So it wrote a report. Let's go ahead and go out to Windows Explorer and open that up. So we've got a report here with a little thumbnail of all of our clashes. But let's say we don't want to see one with all of the clashes in here, just the ones that would cause an issue. So I could add a new test here and say, all right, let's do all of the plumbing versus maybe just structural columns, because I know that's where my footings are located for that category. Run another test, and now we're just down to that one clash right here. All right. So that is the Clash Detective tool, and I think I do actually have a couple seconds here to show you how I was able to get that site file from within Infraworks. So these are all the software platforms that I've installed. Most of these are from the AEC collection. So if I launch Infraworks here, this usually doesn't take too long to launch. Hopefully we'll be able to launch that without a crash. If not, we're doing pretty well on time to hit our target here to leave time for some Q&A. I don't know if that actually launched. Try that again. There it goes. So this looks like very hard to use, but I'm telling you, this is the easiest tool, and just to get a nice little piece of site context, it's excellent. Let's see. While that's launching, maybe I will open up the question pane here. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and transition into our Q&A session while that's loading, and then hopefully once that's up and running, I'll show you how I got that site. So feel free to type any questions you would like in the window, and we'll address those. And actually, it looks like my Infraworks is starting to load. It's initializing. So yeah, don't be shy. If you have any questions, type them in. Or if there's anything you'd like to see, we should have some time. All right, so looking at this pretty quickly, we've got something here called the model builder. This is how easy it is. You just click on this. And again, it's accessing a huge database. So it probably takes a couple minutes here. And I've got the whole country here, so I can zoom into my site. Some sites will have buildings modeled already. Some will not. A lot of them will have roads. As you saw in the model that I made before, we had some train tracks modeled in there. So really all I did was I found the boundaries that I wanted for my site, and literally just clicked this button here, and then gave it a name, clicked create, and it sends you a email when the model's created, and then you can go back into Infraworks and you'll see it listed here, and that's where you can easily open it up. In this case, this one was already created, so I can open it up now and then just download it as an FBX to my hard drive. And it was as simple as that. Yeah, if I could remember where it is, yeah, export 3D model, and then you can pick whatever settings you'd like from there and save it. Excellent tool, great tool that comes with your AEC collection. All right, so with that, we are right at our allotted time for Q&A. So like I said, I haven't seen any questions. Okay, wait. I'm seeing them come in now. Perfect. Okay, excellent. Let me switch slides here. All right. Let's see here. Oh, okay, yeah. So we had a question about the underlay feature in Revit for Navisworks files. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that one. So basically, if you have any file in Navisworks, you can save it as a NWD, or even I think it might work with NWC files. So you can use the tool with inside Revit. I did not launch Revit. Now I have a lot of stuff running, so it might take a minute. Let me kill. We'll live dangerously here. I'll launch it. And maybe I could also show you how to export an NWC too. So you can use it as an underlay. Unfortunately, you can't snap to it or anything, and the rendering materials don't come through. So it's really nice to have, but it does have some limitations. Let's move on to the next question here while that's loading. Yeah, so I did say, yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I kind of blew past the marking up. I showed you guys how to move stuff around. So let me switch back over to that. You can absolutely add markups here. So let's open a new file here. Yeah, very easy to do. I'm not going to save this, but let's open up a file here. Let's open up maybe our Sales Hub, click open. So let's say we just want to do some dimensions first. Of course, I don't know why it's taking that long. There we go. All right, so let's say I want to do a couple dimensions and markups here. Let's go to the Review tab, click on Measure. Take some measurements right there. Let's say I want to convert it to a red line. Could do that. you can add in some text. So maybe could say this is the wrong color. Can put that there. You can even do tags, comments like that. Yeah, let's do some comments. Or maybe I'll add a tag. That's a good idea. So I can put a little note there and then tie a note to it, say, click OK, then go back to my comments, and I can see it there. So after you put in all your different comments, you can yeah, let me move this out so I can see it. You can edit it or change the status to active, approved, or resolved. Say OK, and then take a look at it from there. So you'd be able to export that whole list and things like that. All right, so let's move right along here. Yeah, so that Infraworks model, that had varied topography. Let me go back and open that. Yeah, so there was a question here. I guess let me reiterate that for everybody's benefit. It was wondering if it was a flat FBX file from Infraworks or if it had topo. The site at that scale is in the middle of Illinois, so it's just inherently flat. But I've actually done ones of, here, let's move around in here. So yeah, you can see there is some variation, but I actually did one here of Copper Mountain, and it looks really great. In fact, let me get out of there. Let me open that one up. That might take a minute to load, but on the Navis side, yeah, let me create a new file here, or I'll open up one that we were working on that had the site. So yeah, you can see there is some variation. Like if you look at the edge of that building there, it slopes from front to back. That's all because of the site. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around between these questions a little bit, but if I go back to Revit, start a new project here. If you did want to load in a Navisworks file, that is now under the of course, I can't remember where it is now. Before I forget, if you want to export an NWC file from Revit, on the Add-ins tab, go to External Tools, and then click Navisworks 2018. Let's see. Hang on a minute. Yeah, I think it's called Coordination Model. Where is that? So one thing I do in Revit, if I forgot where something was, you can do keyboard shortcuts. Go Coordination Model. Okay, insert link. And it tells me where it is. There it is, Coordination Model, right there. So you could load in an NWD or NWC file and just kind of use it as an underlay. All right, so I think we've addressed all the files, or all the questions. If nothing else, I think that's it. And thanks for joining me. I'm ready to hand it back over to Ashley.
Okay, thanks, Dan, for the great presentation. Yes, this will conclude our broadcast. If you think of additional questions later, you can simply reply to that confirmation email or reminder email you receive from GoToWebinar, and we can get those to Dan or whoever it needs to go to get your questions answered. And once again, if you could take a few moments to fill out the survey, we do appreciate that. It will just automatically pop up as we close down today. And thanks for attending, and have a great day, everybody.